Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Everyone, and welcome to Turn the Page. I'm Jen, your host today, and I'm here with the debut author of an absolutely delightful rom-com. Could I please ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yes. Hi, I am Kristen Alicia, and my book is called You've Been Served. It's about a young woman's first year of law school. She's a former chef, and she's a little bit burnt out from being a chef, and so she asked the magic 8 ball what she should do, and for a variety of reasons she asked if she should go to law school, and the magic 8 ball tells her yes. So the book is about her navigating her first year of law school.
Nice. Yeah. And, I went to your website and I saw the Magic 8 Ball feature on the page. And I asked the Magic 8 Ball if we were going to have a good interview, and it said outlook good. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
And you have to listen to the Magic 8 Ball.
Absolutely. Yes. It worked out well. Great for Simone,
Exactly. It worked out very well for Simone.
Had you, before we get into the book itself, can you tell us a little bit about your journey to this book? Because you've had a very eclectic and interesting career path, and I'd love to hear a little bit about how you ended up here with this book.
Sure. So like you said, I've had a varied career. My background is in law, but before that, I've done a variety of things. And after that, I've done a variety of things. But I've always loved writing. For as long as I can remember, I've loved writing, and I love romance books. And so, I went to law school primarily because I loved writing. I liked crafting stories, and law school kind of allows you to do that. And so, but I found that the practice of law wasn't something that I wanted to do. But You've Been Served kind of came out of just me musing about law school in some ways. So I just started writing at first about my experience with law school, and then I was sort of thinking about just a funny story that happened my first year, where a friend asked if I'd asked a Magic 8 Ball if I should go to law school. I had not, but I thought that would make kind of a funny premise for how someone would end up in this very intense environment. And so that's kind of how You've Been Served was born. And I knew I wanted to write a romance because I love reading romance. But I wanted it to be something very, a little light and fun. And that gives kind of it shows a reality of law school, but also in a fun way.
Yeah, I really resonated with the depiction of, let's say, higher education, because I don't have a law degree, but I got a PhD in medieval history, and the challenges,
Right.
challenges and the personalities all felt like so resonant. And that, that's my first question, actually, because something that I thought the book does so impressively is that it's very realistic about the challenges of law school and interacting with the people that you interact with and navigating a really high pressure environment. But at the same time, the book is done with such a light touch, and it has such just a feel good vibe to it, And so I'm curious, like, how do you navigate that balancing act of like this, not pulling any punches with like the difficulty of her experience, but while also sort of having the story maintain that kind of like light, fun feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It does. So, no one thing is all one way. So, law school isn't all bad. And I wanted to depict that. It isn't all a bad thing. So I wanted to be able to show that even though Simone's doing this really intense thing, there are some lighthearted moments. And so it was just kind of getting this balance between, kind of showing her inner turmoil and what's going on, but also showing that she has fun with her friends, and she meets this amazing guy, Silas, and, showing the more lighthearted moments for her. And it was kind of a tough balance, but I think being able to pick out some really just fun moments that had nothing to do with her being in school. They just had to do with her living. And I think that was really helpful in kind of getting that balance.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think, what I see happening for Simone is that like the thing that really supports you through all these challenges, like is your cohort, and the people who are going through it with you, because they're not all in competition with you, like even though that's kind of what the environment expects of you. Some of them are, more cooperative and supportive. And so that environment also felt like very authentic.
Exactly. I wanted to show that even though it is this competitive environment, she has a squad, if you will. She has friends that are supportive and helpful and make sure she remembers to just have a little fun.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the setting, the law school in particular, where it takes place, because our protagonist travels from California to Michigan, which is another sort of another challenge, is adjusting to a totally new sort of environment and way of life. Um, was that your experience? Did you travel really far for law school too, and sort of find yourself in a new place, or?
I did. So I had lived my entire life in California. I grew up in Oakland. I went to undergrad in LA, and so when I was trying to go to when I decided to go to law school, I wanted to do something completely different. And I actually ended up in Michigan, which is how I picked Michigan State. I went to Michigan State. I liked it. So I really wanted to be able to use that as my setting. A place that I knew, a place that, East Lansing is very cute. That's where Michigan State is. It's a very cute town, but it would allow me to show this stark difference between, where Simone comes from, which is this very urban environment, to college town, a little more rural, a little more country, if you will. It's not, and so I just wanted to be able to show that big difference between the two places, so that it would be this kind of a culture shock for her.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think to me, it ties back to her decision in the first place, kind of to go to law school on the advice of a magic 8 ball. Like that's a really good, like, it's a good inception point, and it's also a really good like character trait, like it establishes her as somebody who's like really playful and fun and open to new experiences. And I think that attitude is also what sort of like bolsters her through this whole experience too. She has a very open mind and a very like kind of yes and like improv type spirit, like roll with whatever comes. Like
Right.
so I'd love to talk about the slow burn romance. Because I love stories that, really take a lot of time for the romance to sort of bubble and simmer and finally like happen. So I'm curious about like when you are doing that and pacing a story, how do you sort of like how do you maintain that tension, right? Like if the romantic tension between two characters is like a rope, like how do you keep it taut between like, the forces that are pulling them together, but also those that are maybe making them hesitant and pushing them apart a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. I think the biggest thing for writing romantic tension is kind of the build. And so, and I love slow burn. It's my favorite, it's my favorite trope. So I just adore it. But I think it's just I like that. I like slow burn because you kind of watch these two people fall in love. And so I think that's what drives the tension. They meet, and then you see all these like small moments that turn into bigger moments, that get to bigger moments, to the climax. And so I think it's just a matter of making sure you see a lot of the characters together on the page, and see them just kind of falling in love, see them getting to know each other, and see them experiencing different things about each other, the light touches, the like way someone walks or moves or something that catches their attention, and keep adding to those things.
Yeah. Another thing I really love too is romances that, obviously the interactions between the to be couple are super important, but also romances that have like a really great supporting cast. And, because the interactions of the protagonists like with their friends and the people in their social circle can be just as like influential, for how a relationship develops, because those other people are going to give you advice or talk to you or just shape your attitudes and your outlooks, and help you learn who you are. So a lot of romances are kind of about like figuring out who you are while you are meeting someone else, and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about the supporting characters and sort of like the role they play in, like, I guess, supporting our couple through the story?
Sure. So I would say Tiffany is one of the first people outside of Silas that Simone meets in law school. And Tiffany is one of my favorite characters. But she's influential more in helping Simone figure out school, which helps Simone get to Silas. And so Silas isn't necessarily her favorite person, but it isn't Tiffany's favorite person. But she does work with Simone to figure out kind of what she's doing, really, which helps Simone, helps guide Simone back to Silas, or to Silas, I should say. Keith is another interesting character. He, without giving too much away, I guess, he is Silas's good friend, and you see less interaction with Keith and Silas and more interaction with Simone and Silas. But Keith is a good reminder to Simone that Silas is a good person, and for her to remember that, just as they navigate everything, that Silas is going through some things also, but is a good man.
Silas is really great. Oh my gosh. And I really love that, like, I don't even want to say conflict, right? Like, it's not like it's just really sort of like that tension, the will they, won't they? Like, some of that comes from, the fact that these are young people who are kind of fumbling into like adulthood and not always making the smartest emotional choices or things like that. But also, like, they are always kind of coming from a good place, like,
right.
you really see that with Silas, because he is so hesitant, but it's like for really good reasons. I don't really want to, like, I am also afraid of spoiling things, so I'll let you say what you want to say about it. But could you talk a little bit about, like, yeah, where his character comes from and sort of like his perspective on this budding romance?
Yeah. Silas is a little older, not much, but a little bit older than Simone. So he's lived a little bit more, but he comes from his relationship with his parents is a little fraught. Well, with his mother is a little bit fraught. And so he's coming from a place where he has something to prove, which is kind of in conflict with his budding relationship with Simone, but he doesn't immediately see that. So it takes some chats, we'll say, with Simone for him to get there. He's not immediately he doesn't immediately understand why some of the things he's doing might be problematic for her. But those things are coming in, from the way that he has interacted with his mom for his whole life.
That's something else I feel like I've noticed more and more in romance, is that I feel like I've read some books recently where they do kind of get into the parental dynamics and maybe how that shapes, how a person views romance and relationships and interpersonal interactions. And I really love how that deepens his character, because yeah, he has a little bit of growing to do, but he's really, again, like, it's about being very open-minded and very receptive. I think, like, they're both very receptive, open people, and that kind of bolsters them through the ups and downs.
Exactly. It's not, this isn't, this isn't a romance where neither of them is open to accepting love. It's nothing like that. They both have some growing up to do. But they're open to each other, and to love and to finding each other. And so they just needed to grow up a little bit. And, for Simone, it was sort of figuring out who she is and what she wants. And for Silas knows what he wants. It's more a matter of for him navigating kind of how to get it. But they are both open to love and, very receptive to each other, really.
Do you have favorite rom-coms that influenced you, whether they're books or film or what have you?
I do. Let's see. Well, Legally Blonde was a big influence for You've Been Served. It's funny though, when I was writing Professor Patton's character,
Gosh, yeah.
I didn't necessarily think about Legally Blonde until the book was pretty much written. I was like, oh yeah, I guess, yeah, okay. And then, everything Jasmine Guillory, is those are some of my favorite rom-coms. Talia Hibbert, same thing. Clueless it wasn't influential. It's just a movie that I love. It's a rom-com. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, those are some of the biggies.
That's great. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you brought up Professor Patton because oh gosh, another like really great character. And I didn't really see it until you just mentioned it, but yeah, that is absolutely like the kind of character that's at work in Legally Blonde too, but also just like a very real person in academia broadly, you know? Like
Exactly.
every university has at least one, if not more. So in crafting that character, obviously I'm not going to like ask you for names because that would be very problematic, but is she kind of like a composite figure or like drawn from experience or like other personalities you've encountered along the way or
She is. She's kind of, without giving away a lot about what happens, but she's a combination of two professors that I encountered. And I don't want to say what happens with her, but yeah, she's definitely a composite of two professors that I had. And I wanted to make Patton kind of an interesting character because she's very realistic. I've encountered numerous professors like her, but these two professors that I kind of, I guess, modeled her after were just very influential, but in very different ways for me. But yeah, she's realistic. There are professors that are just like that. I actually work in a law school now, and I hear my students talk about their professors, and it's just like, yep, I'm glad I wrote this character because this is very much something that keeps coming up, and not just in law school, in academia, period.
absolutely. And it does sort of, remind me that like we talked about the support of the cohort and all that, and like it is a good thing, but there also is like a little bit of trauma bonding. I think that
Absolutely.
like but speaking of trauma or rather lack thereof, one of the things that one of the talking points that came with this book is about how this is a book about Black joy that does not include Black trauma. And I think that is super important. And like, which is not to say there is not trauma, because like we just talked about trauma bonding and like grad school is kind of inherently traumatic, but it is a story that is has complex emotional stakes and stuff like that. So could you talk a little bit about, writing a story about Black joy and how that manifests in this book?
Yeah, we tend to read just sort of, we see a lot of books about, Black trauma, queer trauma, marginalized people going through these traumatic events, but we often don't get to see just joy, and in particular, Black joy. And I wanted to show my characters just kind of living. They're happy, they become happy. But I want to show the light moments. They're enjoying themselves. They're in school, and they're just kind of living their lives. And though this grad school, law school is a traumatic event, as traumatic events go, it's more of an adjustment, than this huge like life horrible life altering thing. It's a thing, and it's hard, and it's, she's having a tough time, but mostly it ends up being, something she enjoys. And I think it's really important to show Black joy, just, Black folks living and having a good time and just being.
Yeah. And it does, I think, for a very long time in storytelling, you did only see a very, I think, restricted range of narratives for Black protagonists, whether it is in film or in literature. Especially when I think of film, like they're like Black trauma almost got associated with a kind of like cultural prestige, like to the exclusion of like almost every other type of story. And so I think it's really exciting that we get to see stories outside of the, really narrow bottleneck that existed on these stories. So yeah.
Exactly. And I think that was really important for me to show. You know, everybody has a wide range of life experiences and life stories. And I wanted to make sure that, Black joy was represented. I think Talia Hibbert does a really good job of that. Jasmine Guillory, like I said. There are a number of, Black writers that do a great job with this. And I wanted to join them. I want to be one of them as well. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for joining us and for joining all of us. This has been a really lovely interview. And I'm wondering, do you have any more books in the pipeline? I know sometimes, it's hard to talk about things that aren't sure or announced yet, but are you working on stuff or?
I am. I'm not, fingers crossed that it comes to fruition, but I've been working on a Tiffany story. Yeah. So I'm really excited to write about her. She's just such a fun, just interesting character. I'm excited to dig into her story. And then I'm working on something kind of out of that whole law school law world, about a woman who fosters a dog and fosters a man's dog for 6 months. And yeah, that's where we are right now with that, but I'm working on it.
I love that. I love all of that. Thank you so much. And if you ever want to come back and talk about those projects, when they are out in the world or about to be out in the world, because I would love to read them. So I'm going to buy this book and make all my friends buy it so that we get to, read the next ones too.
Hey, thank you.
No problem. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, thanks for having me.
Listeners, you can pick up You've Been Served. By the time that you hear this, it will be available. So please go to your favorite library or independent bookstore and pick it up and read it immediately. You will not regret it. It is so delightful. Thank you so much for joining us. And it is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.